Hey guys, and welcome back for another episode. Today we take a look at not one, not two, not even three, but 5 8-bit Kirby games in our 8-bit Kirby coverage episode. Kirby's one of those characters that just about everybody knows who he is, even if you never played one of his games. You certainly would remember him from one of the installments of Super Smash Bros. Just like in those games, Kirby's most iconic aspects are his cute, round, pink stature, and of course his copy ability. But did you know that in his first game, Kirbys Dreamland, released back in 1992, Kirby had neither of those things? If we went by the Game Boy gameplay alone, it wouldn't even be obvious what color he is, at all. But sure enough, that box art is impossible to ignore. It didn't take long for his classic pink look to be burned into our memories though, with every game after that point being exactly as we would expect. The idea behind creating a character and series like Kirby was Nintendo wanted an approachable, easier platformer that would even appeal to the newest of players, and also initially targeted the Game Boy as Kirby's main home, which made a lot of sense when you look at his first 5 8-bit games. Technically, Kirby did have two 16-bit games released before Dreamland 2 and Blockball, and even when looking into those games, it's pretty obvious that they were fluffing Miss Pillow's titles quite a bit for the younger and more casual audience, with basically a golf concept on various 3D courses. And a puzzle game that originally had nothing to do at all with Kirby with its Japanese release. But apparently, this is what Japan figured American gamers needed, so take that however you will. It's pretty cool to see how the Kirby series developed in its early years, so in a similar vein to the Ninja Gaiden NES or Ghosts and Goblins series, let's go ahead and plow through some games and talk about what makes them different. I actually never beat any of these games before this video, so I'm pumped to check them out with you. No need to keep holding your breath. I'm Jeff, and this is MarMax Gaming. So of course the first game we are taking a look at is Kirbys Dreamland, which I will be playing on the Super Game Boy. The title screen may be lacking in color, but it's certainly not lacking that cheery, joyful Kirby energy that we've all come to know and love. Starting the game out here, as mentioned before, Kirby doesn't even have the copy ability in his first game, but that won't stop him from still inhaling his enemy's whole. You can press down to immediately swallow your enemy into your lower intestine, or shoot them back out at the enemies or blocks. Aside from Kirby's cute appearance, the gameplay is also what really makes this game very approachable for any player. I mean, a platformer that doesn't require precise jumps and allows you to endlessly puff your way over just about anything is a big part of that. Plus, having an attack air puff come out as soon as you land is also really forgiving. Another thing to mention, as opposed to only taking a hit or two to lose a life, you get 6 with Kirby. Control-wise, something to note that it's actually quite easy to accidentally puff up to float pressing left and right, since any up input will cause you to inflate. It's pretty cool to see how many enemies from the first game are still used today, such as the Waddle Dees, these little flying guys, and just a bunch of them. I also really enjoy seeing the original and iconic Warp Star rides in all of its glory. Through just about the entire adventure, even on your first playthrough, you're pretty safe to just keep pressing to the right and taking out or avoiding what you can. Even though there aren't abilities to copy, there are still a handful of temporary power-ups, such as the spicy food that has fire shooting from your mouth, something I'm sure some people recognize from Smash Bros. Brawl. There's also the microphone ability, which is recognizable from Kirby Superstar if you happen to play that game first. The manual description is pretty funny, written in first person by Kirby saying he can't sing very well, the microphone will make the enemies explode from laughter. Checking out the first world's boss, Wispy Woods, where you look out for those air puffs, inhale the fallen apples, and shoot them right back until victory, and in classic Kirby fashion, seeing your favorite victory dance. As we move from level to level, the music stays upbeat, the challenge is mild, and you just keep going from room to room until you get to the boss, and that's pretty much how each stage works. Speaking of the boss, something pretty crazy that I didn't realize until right now is in Stage 2, Castle Low. You actually end up fighting a bunch of Lolos, one of HAL's previous release from '89. It might even take you a second to realize how to get their block safely, but once you do, it's another victory for Kirby. The last couple of levels are about as happy as they sound with Float Island and Bubbly Clouds, just going from real enemies that you'll probably recognize from other games. I want to compliment a pretty cool transition used before the third stage's boss, where Kirby grabs the Warp Star and gets plugged into a whale's blowhole before shooting up into the clouds. And you've got a shoot 'em up fight with a blimp, which is honestly pretty awesome and unexpected overall. The fourth stage's boss, Kracko, doesn't really mess around, and I think he had some fair challenge that really requires you to pay attention and react quickly to not only get out of his way, but also, of course, to inflict damage too. The game finishes off strong with a boss rush, revisiting the four you just faced, and then finally coming toe-to-toe with King DDD. King DDD. If you've ever played Smash Bros. Brawl before, his moveset will immediately make more sense to you as you go into this fight. What you'll spend a lot of time doing is floating, since he can also inhale you, but you also have to be ready to drop to inhale a star from some of his moves and blow enough of those back in order to win. And once again, it's another fight that surprisingly has some challenge compared to the rest of the game, but I think it's a perfect way to finish things off, and it's just a lot of fun to get it down just right. With the game lacking the ability to save, it makes sense that even a first-time player could finish this game in a half hour or so, and practice players significantly faster than that. When you beat the game, you are given direction on how to access the Extra mode, which doubles damage done to Kirby and alters enemies to be more difficult. Out of curiosity, I did play with some of it, but you're only rewarded with direction on how to access a sound test and giving yourself more lives, not any extra secret bosses or anything like that. Overall, Kirbys Dreamland accomplished exactly what it set out to do. Be an easy and approachable game for even the youngest or newest of players, plus it set a great foundation for the series to build on. Kirby's next entry in the series takes us from Dreamland into a larger-than-life adventure on the NES. Kirbys Adventure came to us in the summer of '93, less than a full year after the Game Boy release. This is where the Kirby that we know and love started to take shape. And color, by the way. I had played Kirbys Adventure before, but this was my first time actually finishing it, and I'm glad I did. The title definitely deserves it. With a nice how to play segment available immediately, they make it clear that this is not the same Kirby as before. Kirbys Adventure does a lot of important things well. The music is lively and fantastic, you can now copy abilities, you can do a slide kick, you now have an overworld that links together the stages in a really nice way, a warp star to travel between the worlds, a save feature, it brings back some old bosses, such as Wispy Woods and King DDD, along with several new ones, plus it's now all in glorious color, and it's a great looking NES game, coming out quite a bit later in the console's lifespan, 2 years after the Super Nintendo hit the market. You might even think that the first Kirby game with copy abilities might play it safe with, say, 5, maybe 10, but no, go ahead and guess how many they had. 25! Honestly, just thinking about that for a second, it's simply amazing. That's the definition of going above and beyond. They clearly wanted Kirby to stay fresh and really be taken seriously with his first NES debut. Plus, with so many powers to seek out and try, talk about outstanding replay value. You have 7 different worlds, although they're referred to as levels. It's just that each level has multiple other levels within them that you access through numbered doors as you play along. As you clear stages, there's a cool animation as space clears to reveal the next challenge. There's also 3 different mini-games that become accessible for extra lives, and they're all really fun, not to mention the cloud hop at the end of every single level. You have a reaction timing game with Quick Draw Kirby. Just look at this guy's picture in the manual. You have Egg Catcher, which takes a keen eye with reaction to hold your mouth open for the eggs while letting go to close for the bombs. The next game gives you 2 credits with a crane. As you press and hold the button, the crane slides forward and will only drop down once you release. Tighter timing is of course required for the bigger Kirbys that award the player with 2 1-ups, but I found that they were some of the easier lives to earn compared to everything else. As you would expect, the further you go, the more stages in each world, and of course, more challenge that comes with them too. Kirbys Adventure is still a very approachable and easygoing game, especially in the beginning, but there are a lot more challenges to be had, especially with some of the bosses. Many players I'm sure can relate their frustrations, especially if they experienced this when they were younger. As soon as only the 3rd world's boss, where you take on the Sun and Moon, that go by the names Mr. Bright and Mr. Shine in an epic duel battle. There are several attacks to look out for that can easily catch you by surprise or even trap you near the edge of the screen. It's such a cool fight in general, easily one of the best in the series, and even without any nostalgia involved, I can say it's one of the best and most creative fights out there. It even changes from day to night based on what's in the sky when they tag in and out. I mean, how awesome is that? Krakow is back, serving once again as the 4th boss, and that's pretty awesome how things start you off using your high jump abilities to escape for a while before squaring off and fighting to finish him off. It definitely feels like an even easier fight than in Dreamland, especially with your jump ability being able to tear right through him multiple times. Heavy Mole is a pretty weird name for an even weirder looking boss. It's a cool concept, moving through the ground and having to keep up, before inhaling and shooting back the missiles that come your way. But speaking of significant boss fights, this is where we meet Meta Knight for the first time. I love how they point out a sword for you to pick up before going toe-to-toe with him. It's just epic. The last few bosses are definitely worth talking about as well, because as you've been seeing, Kirbys Adventure has some really awesome boss fights. King DDD is back, and with a similar moveset too, just with a couple differences going on. but these last two fights really surprised me with their pace and everything that went into them. Kirby fans know that the series has its surprisingly dark moments, especially toward the end of some games. Well, it's pretty neat to know that this dark theme started with the NES entry. After learning your way through a pretty challenging and surprising shoot-'em-up style fight with a darkness orb in the Fountain of Dreams, you might be shocked that your last fight is with a darkness wizard, the notorious Nightmare. There's just a lot to appreciate when looking at a final fight like this. I mean, the animation and everything going on for the NES is just outstanding. I love the fight, its music is excellent, the Star Rod is just a super fun weapon they allow you to use at the end of the game, and it's overall just a great challenge to finish it off. Plus you get so much bang for your buck. Even if you know what you're doing with minimal mistakes, you're still looking at around 2 hours of play, and for others it could be significantly longer than that, which could span over multiple lengthy sessions. So after Kirby's first breakthrough on the Game Boy, we can see that he really did a beautiful job hitting his stride right afterward on the NES. Now let's check out the next game. What happens when a series starts to get hot? Well, spin-offs of course. Taking a look into Kirby's Pinball Land was actually nothing short of shocking in a few different ways. To be honest, I didn't think covering this game would give us that much to talk about, which really was just an assumption looking at the title. I had never played it before, and I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people. But like I said, Kirby's Pinball Land is straight up shocking in basically every way. For starters, you have 3 pinball courses to select from, and each one of them actually spans 3 screens long. Each one of the screens in all 3 maps have creative tie-ins from Kirbys Dreamland and even Kirbys Adventure. The way you even launch the ball into play is cool, a direct reference to another minigame that we just played. The better your timing to press A at the bottom, the further Kirby will launch. If your timing is tight enough, he'll actually get launched with a warp star trail behind him all the way to the top, which is an immensely helpful and important skill to develop if you ever want to be a contender facing off with this game. On the flip side, if your timing is poor, you lose your life right then and there. And speaking of lives, it brings up the other factor that really makes this game feel impossible to complete. You only get 3 lives, that's it. I never once earned a 1-up, even on attempts that were upwards of 20 minutes and triggering a milestone point clearing celebration. But still, no 1-ups. On the top of each board, there's a sub-boss type of challenge, but getting up there and staying up there can prove to be unbelievably picky and difficult. Let's talk about each of the specific maps. You select the board by either slapping Kirby with a flipper or just letting him go into the cannon and choose with that. We've got Wispy, Kracko, and Poppy. Let's take a look at the first board I managed to beat, with Poppy. The thing with the 2 lower sections, and this is true in general for all the maps, it can feel downright ridiculous to move up. A couple seconds go by and the main enemy or obstacle spawns right in the middle, like Frosty at the bottom. Once he's in the way, you'll need insane luck. Otherwise, you have to hit him multiple times, spelling out his name, which may remind some of you of Pokemon Pinball, and it turns out the same engine was actually used, so that's really neat. After that, you have 2 bombs and a couple of Kirby spitting out stuff that gets in the way, although this is one of the easier screens to pass through, I'd say, in the game. It's still hard though. Then finally up top, the bizarre mini-boss setup is that you have to crack these eggs open to let the chicks escape, but also have to hit the poppies away too, otherwise they'll blow up the egg and you need to start that one over. One of the absolute worst things about this game is how horrifically unforgiving it is. If your ball rolls through your flippers or behind them, the health or status is completely reset with the mini-boss. I had so many times on the multiple boards where I'd finally get up there, I'd take the boss down to where they maybe had 1 or 2 hits left, and then the ball would take a crappy bounce, and then you're basically starting over at that point, like you just got there. Kirby's Pinball Land can feel and play like purgatory. And I don't recommend this game to people with addictive or gambling personalities, because I could absolutely feel how dangerous this game could be for your time, especially if you don't like to quit on a game before finishing it. Even when you defeat the mini-boss, they only make the warp star available for a few seconds before repeating the entire fight over again from zero. This game is absolutely relentless. I somehow had beginner's luck on my side as I defeated Poppy on only my first time there, within maybe 20 minutes of playing, but got totally boned several times in a row after that, which really started to put things in perspective. That star between your flippers, if you touch that, Kirby is brought right back to the mini-boss immediately. There's no limit to how many times you can keep having chances slip through your fingers over and over. Like, I've gotten to a boss 4 times with the same life just to then fall down a screen or 2 and eventually die. It's crazy. The bosses can even temporarily disable your flippers. I mean, how cheap is that? As if it's not hard enough, you really do need some luck on your side to get through the fights, and even when you do, the one last test is actually hitting the star rod. You could hit the warp star even after the fight and be right back on the board. Ridiculous. Let's talk about Krako's board next. Each screen is super annoying and tough to get past, albeit fun to look at, which pretty much sums up how the game plays. You face off against Mr. Bright and Mr. Shine again, with clouds in the way, which are not easy at all to get through, and again, any slip past your flippers, the fight resets, and it just blows. I managed to get past them a couple times, must have gotten close at least 10 times. Once the sun is defeated, the moon is out with the stars protecting him, and only if you can get beyond that, you'll get a shot at Krako. And I had a few attempts against him, none of them prevailed though. Honestly, this game makes you feel like you're always so close, so you just want to keep playing. It actually reminded me of the joke in South Park with Stan's dad when he's playing Heroin Hero, where he always thinks he's going to finally catch the dragon.
Alright dude, let's do this. What the hell?
Oh.
Come on, you almost got me.
I can get him! Wait, where's he going now?
You don't ever catch the dragon, Dad!
No other game has made me even think about that at all, but Kirby's Pinball Land will do this to you again and again and again. Let's look at Wispy, another board with brutal obstacles in the way, which again is why it's so important to seize your luck and opportunities with this game. I managed to get Wispy a handful of times, but for one reason or another, just kept getting sent back immediately. So Kirby's Pinball Land, it's a really cool little game that they made way too difficult to finish. I mean, way too hard. I'll go ahead and provide footage of what would be waiting for us if we ever managed to make it through all 3 boards with a final showdown against DDD. If I were to vow to beat this game one day, it seems the smartest thing to do would be not waste any time at all on the lower 2 screens and just try to really milk and get the most out of those warp chances to the top, as opposed to wasting hours in no man's land. Let's take a look at the next 8-bit game released, Kirbys Dreamland 2. It's pretty awesome the way Kirby opens up with what feels like an encore, which is pretty funny and makes sense. For as much as Dreamland and Adventure quickly built something up we could recognize as familiar throughout the series, Dreamland 2 pioneers a couple new ideas. The Super Game Boy's frame serves as a bit of a spoiler, showing you your 3 new sidekicks that you can find and ride along through the levels. You've got Rick the hamster, Koo the owl, and Kine the fish. I think it's Kine. Is it Kinney? I don't know. You usually get these guys after a mini-boss fight of some kind, releasing them from their bag. They're pretty cool for a couple reasons, since they do change up the gameplay with their unique controls and also combine with your copied abilities. Plus they even have their own life bar, making you feel extra confident and strong as you plow through the levels. You can see that Dreamland 2 borrowed the door idea from Kirbys Adventure, since it works so well, but they also added an even cooler touch on how you travel between the worlds, being able to see entire planets now. As far as the levels go, you're often teased with what teammate you might actually find as you play. Getting around to finally playing this game actually helped me appreciate references I never understood in Kirby's Crystal Shards, with these teammates spiritually living on through this rock and crescent power-up. That's really awesome, and this is just one of many examples where going back to understand and experience the roots of a series leads to all of those, so that's where that came from, moments. Kirbys Dreamland 2 definitely plays, sounds, and feels like a sequel in a big way. They clearly brought their A-game and were already hitting a beautiful stride with Kirbys Adventure, so you can rest assured that the game is bigger, more involved, and a bit more challenging, and simply firing on all cylinders by a team that knew exactly what they were doing. You encounter a good amount of sub-bosses, the stage design is more creative, it's a much bigger game than Dreamland, with a save feature and plenty of game to get through. It's really fun to see all of the power-ups that you come across, and naturally getting curious to see how they function with your teammates too. There are 7 copy abilities in Kirbys Dreamland 2, which doesn't sound like much, but they're all fun to use, especially when you consider that those 7 abilities function differently for your 3 animal pals too. So between the 4 characters, it's like there are 28 abilities. It's also quite a sizable sequel with 7 planets, 4 to 8 stages each, providing a total of 38 party levels for you to conquer. The planets are Grassland, Big Forest, Ripple Field, Iceberg, Red Canyon, Cloudy Park, and finally the Dark Castle. Trying the game is one thing, it may wear you down or catch you off guard, especially with some late game trial and error. But overall, it's not ridiculous to get through just using your attacks a lot or floating around enemies. The boss fights are really solid, bringing back some Dreamland classics along with plenty of new foes too. Plus they even have Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright from Kirbys Adventure, which is really awesome and has a couple of unique aspects to it as well. It's usually just a matter of getting to know a pattern, but some fights can get pretty tricky, and at least on your first few attempts, they aren't easy by any means. It's kind of interesting that they didn't bring back Meta Knight for this game. Once you get to the end, you square off against King DDD again. He's got his classic fighting style, but they also added like a rage mode where he gets all fast and his moves change a bit too. The music also sounds super epic and cool during the fight. It's a real classic that's been used in a bunch of games afterward. Once you manage to keep out of DDD's range and use those stars from some of his attacks to take him out, that's when you would roll to the credits. Eventually, you'll see that this may not be the real ending, as if things aren't settled. Well, when you look at your save file, you'll notice that although you just finished the game, your percentage still needs work. It's pretty likely that you may have picked up, or at least noticed, the shiny item known as a rainbow drop on the first world. Always in special rooms with secret access points. Not just requiring a specific copy ability to work, it may also entail grabbing a certain animal pal from a separate level and then bringing them to the other level with a specific copy ability, not to mention having no clue at all where they might be. They're not at all obvious. Some feel downright impossibly unlikely that you'd ever figure them out. Like you have to do bizarre things like dropping your ability just so you can quickly inhale and spit out a block and re-grab it before it bursts apart after only a few seconds. Or sometimes having to find the least obvious entrance points, and it would only work with a certain animal from another level with a specific ability, and it may even completely hide it from you unless you simply already knew where to go or what to do. They're crazy. I couldn't imagine going through these before the internet as a kid, and honestly, tons of comments on those videos are all saying the same thing, how impossibly hard it was to actually figure all of these out on your own. It just wouldn't feel right to feature this game in a beating and reviewing series if we didn't unlock the true final boss. So after dragging through to get all of these rainbow drops, we fight DDD. But this time, when he goes down, the true final boss emerges. Dark Matter. The boss starts out hard and, surprising enough, with really tough defense that would make you wish that this wasn't only his first form. You've got to space very carefully and also become aware of the fact that your timing when he throws out an orb can hit it right back at him for a much better chunk of damage. It can be hard to avoid damage with his swords flying out, quickly charging out in a loop, or throwing out his orb. After at least a few lives of practice, you realize that dark matter is definitely a nightmare. I didn't even beat this fight the first night I reached it after getting the rainbow drops, and I definitely tried upwards of a solid 20 times. But like with anything else, usually enough practice will get you to the finish line. Let's move on to the last game of today's episode, Kirby's Blockball. Now this is a fun one to end on. Just like Kirby's Pinball Land, I had never even seen this gameplay before, so I wasn't sure what Blockball could possibly mean. Turns out it's just like a brick breaker type of game, but with Kirby of course. My first thoughts were, this is kind of nice to play something so simple after what an ordeal it was to finish Dreamland 2, but initial fears are of course, I really hope it's not just a couple hours or more straight of brick breaker. And to my relief, as I played past the first couple levels, it definitely has a lot more going for it than that. There are of course the expected different characters and graphics that you'll recognize from the series throughout the levels, but as far as unique gameplay goes, there are a couple things going on. So we've got 10 worlds here, although they call them stages. There are 4 levels in each stage and then a boss fight, which is a cool change of pace and definitely fun to see the familiar faces coming back in this type of way. Along the journey, we are slowly introduced to a power-up at a time that will help you tear through the bricks, especially certain tougher kinds, in a much easier or more doable way. It also took me a few levels before realizing I needed to press A to get the ball to morph into Kirby, making certain blocks now possible to destroy. At first I thought I was activating a power-up that would run out of energy and wasn't sure of the timing, before realizing it has to do with pressing A right as the ball comes into contact with your paddle in order to get Kirby to come out. Speaking of paddles, you may notice that some stages have paddles on the sides too, which are of course moved up and down versus left and right, providing another layer of variety throughout some challenges. There are also 4 mini-games that you can warp to, all with the goal of earning extra lives in one way or another. As I was almost an hour into it, it appeared that I was halfway through the game, but I couldn't help but realize some of my cleared areas looked different than the others. And I can tell you right now, my motivation for completing something like Kirby's Blockball is not at an all-time high, especially if it has a lot to do with luck of your balance and drains too much time. But overall, speaking of time, that's what Kirby's Blockball is definitely good at doing. It's great at passing the time, and it's perfect for the Game Boy platform with its short 5-level worlds. I know that I would have played it quite a bit if it was part of our collection growing up. With there being 50 levels, you can rest assured that there's plenty of variety throughout the game, but not necessarily sure I would recommend that anybody goes to plow this game for 2 hours straight like I did in order to get the footage for it. But big fans of Kirby series would definitely enjoy this type of departure from the main games, just since it ties in your copy abilities and brings back a lot of cool boss fights throughout the Blockball adventure. Blockball can have its minor annoyances like waiting for what feels like way too long just to clear the final brick as you bounce everywhere but the last target. But the frustration level is nothing at all when compared with Pinball Land. It's a stern guarantee that game will actually haunt your dreams. As always guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the 5-game Kirby coverage. I appreciate you supporting the channel, and I look forward to seeing you for the next 16-bit episode. Thanks so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.